This was a presentation that was given at the Living Planet Symposium, which was a European Space Agency conference in Prague. And I thought, well, actually, a few of you might be interested in some of the results. So my name's Jonathan Bamber. I'm a professor of physical geography at University of Bristol. Thank you all very much for coming along. I'm going to give a talk today about a 20-year time series of mass balance trends for the green industry. I see many similarities between alpinism and science. With science, okay, it's a different approach. You maybe use equations and calculations and lots of numbers, but it's the same thing. It's wanting to know how the world works and exploring the world. There are some things in your life that you will always remember. The accident was a defining thing in my life. It's changed me physically, it's changed me mentally. There are many things about that are branded on my memory forever, really.
Okay. Ja. Das erste Klettererlebnis hatte ich mit 15 gehabt.
The first time I went climbing, I was 15. Family friends took me along with them. It was more like abseiling than climbing. I remember using my knees and whatever else I could to get myself up the route. It was an amazing experience for me. The great outdoors, working with nature to reach a goal. I was so blown away by the experience that I wanted to do it over again. At the beginning, it's all about numbers and difficulties. Later on, I think it's important, actually essential, that other things become important. Today, the mountains are not only about performance anymore. It's more about the experience as a whole, being with friends and part of a good team, achieving something together, and having a good time along the way. Just the thought itself of having to leave a friend behind, alone in the wall, is unbearable. I don't know if I could climb again.
My mother was basically a single parent bringing up 2 children in a very small flat in North London, and so I guess we didn't have an awful lot of money. We used to get like vouchers from the council to buy clothes and things like that, and it was pretty basic. And I mean, the idea of doing something adventurous, you know, as a kid, it just wasn't going to happen. I can remember going to our public library. There was a book there which was The Southwest Face of Everest by Chris Bonington, and it was a pretty amazing first ascent that they carried out. And it had everything in it. There was adventure, there was excitement, there was a bit of suffering, there was the uncertainty of not knowing whether they'd actually do it, and all those things seemed like really very attractive to me. And I can remember reading the book avidly and thinking, yes, you know, this is what I want to do. The time when I was on crutches, I used to have the same dream almost every night. It was a dream where I would be going along on my crutches, along a path by the side of a river. And then I would suddenly realize that I didn't need them anymore. I would pick up the crutches, throw them in the river, and just run off.
What I find most fascinating about Kashmir is that, due to political unrest, it's been closed for a good 20 years to tourists, but also to alpinists. And because of that, today in Kashmir, you can still experience what originally drew people to places that are now overrun by tourism, like Nepal. Interesting about the Kashmiri region is not only that it's been cut off from tourism, but also maps and other information is just not available or totally outdated. Basically, we had access to a few hand-drawn sketches and very bad and incomplete maps from the 80s, which of course made going there even more interesting.
There are still some really pretty serious tensions between Pakistan and India over that whole border area. And, you know, the fact that there was this conflict was perhaps something that saved my life, maybe. People were very friendly to us, I think mainly because they'd never seen a Westerner before, many of them. So we were a real novelty. And so they would just gather around us and then stare at us for a few hours and, you know, wonder what on earth we were doing.
What impresses me every time I return to Kashmir is how the people shine with happiness, even though they have nothing. Really, nothing. They're happy with what they have and what they do. It's very clear that the conflict in Kashmir is political and not religious. We realized that within the short valley, there are three distinct religions: Hindus, Buddhists, as well as Muslims. They meet with one another. They work together. And above all, they respect one another. It's actually very nice to see that it's even possible for a place like that to exist. There is still huge potential for mountaineering in the Kashmir region. You enter the valley, and there are beautiful mountains to the left and right, and all around. The majority of them are unclimbed. You can choose your line, you can choose any peak. Where else is that possible today? A half hour after the walk up to Kaban, the valley drops down and opens up to an amazing mountain that looks like it was drawn by a child. I mean, when you see that peak, as an alpinist, no questions asked. You have to climb it. With the information we had, we knew the mountain was still unclimbed. We also knew there had been an attempt made at one point, but we didn't know anything about the line or how far they had made it up the mountain. The locals in Kaban told us that in 1993, an English expedition had been in the area and that there was an accident. For me, the night before an ascent is always the most difficult. A lot of thoughts go through my mind. Thoughts about the ascent. Important thoughts, often about problems that could come up, but also about possible solutions. Reflecting on these things is an important part of the whole process.
You know, I've lost several close friends, you know, very experienced mountaineers who, you know the risks, understand how the mountains work, but there are some things which are kind of unpredictable. And when you, in particular, when you're doing new routes, nobody has been on before, then, you know, there are some real risks there. We'd been at base camp for maybe about a week or something like that, and we started up Tupendeo. I was climbing with my partner Angus, so there were 10 in the expedition in all, but it was just me and my climbing partner on this particular climb at the time.
We
were on our approach up to Tupendeo, a fairly long, rubbly slope. After about 6 hours of walking, we arrived at a small ridge, and behind it was a glacier, which was the perfect place to pitch our tents. We were relatively close to the base of the mountain, so we decided to build up our tents and spend the following night there. We started shoveling and clearing an area, and all of a sudden Thomas says, "Hey, what's that over there on the rock?" We went over to take a closer look, and then, yeah, it became clear that it was a rope lying over a rock, and attached to the rope was a belay device.
We climbed the first half of the mountain in a day, and that went reasonably well. But then a storm came in, and we had to bivvy on the mountain for a day to let the storm go through, and it dumped a lot of snow on the face.
We
arrived at the foot of Tupendeo. We took our first look at the west side and saw an impressive rock wall and crack system that went up through the face. It was an unusual and fairly difficult line to choose for a first ascent, but we decided to give it a try. We started climbing, and the first few meters of the line were completely amazing. We were blown away. To have such amazing rock and structure at 5,500 meters in altitude is something that you never see, or at least I never have.
The next day we started climbing again, and we were relatively near the summit, maybe 2 pitches, about 100 meters, perhaps less than 100 meters from the summit. Angus was climbing above me, about 30 meters above me to my left, and I wasn't directly below him. Then he shouted below. Below is what, you know, in Britain, we always shout below if there's some debris, a rock or something coming down. And the rock that he had dislodged came down, and it hit a ledge above me and then went off to an angle. And then I heard this thud. And then I had this sensation that's a bit difficult to describe. I didn't know what was actually happening because the sensation was so strong. Every nerve in my whole body was sort of screaming at me. And then I knew that my leg had been crushed by the rock. The rock had almost severed my leg, roughly halfway between my knee and my ankle, and it kind of looked like this lower bit would just fall off. So that was kind of what you might call quite upsetting. I think we both understood how serious the situation was. We were near the top of an unclimbed peak in a very remote part of the Himalayas. It was a 2-day walk to the nearest village. I didn't really think that I was going to come out of this one.
If you're climbing in a team of 2 and something in the summit area of a peak like Tupendeo happens, then it's very difficult to even attempt a rescue. Difficult, actually almost impossible. I often find the thought interesting. You top out on the summit. It can potentially be the most beautiful day of your life. Or, 5 meters below the summit, you have a really bad accident, and it can very quickly become the worst day of your life. Being very lucky or very unlucky are both so close in that moment. Perhaps that's what makes the summit so special.
We decided that the best thing was for Angus to abseil back down to base camp, for someone from base camp to go down to the village at the roadhead for a few days, walk away, where they had a radio so that they could radio for a helicopter, and then for him to come back up with one of the other climbers to get me down with help from someone else. We put a karamat down, a sleeping mat, and I had a down duvet, and he put me in the bivy bag. And then he abseiled down to base camp. I guess the first hour was sort of okay. I kind of thinking, well, he's going down to get a rescue, but then the time got longer and longer and longer, and there wasn't much to do. I took some photographs. I thought they'd be the last photographs I'd take, and just waited, really. After maybe about a day, perhaps 25 hours, 26 hours, something like that, my legs started to smell quite bad, like a kind of rotten fish smell. And I knew that that was a really bad sign, because that means it's infected. My biggest preoccupation while I was lying there was, how long would it take Angus to get down to base camp? For someone from base camp to go as fast as they could down to the roadhead, and then for a helicopter to come and get me. And I was working out the time over and over again. Well, it would be this many hours, this many, and I thought about 2 days. And so, of course, after, maybe 40 hours or something, I was thinking, where's the helicopter? There's no helicopter. After a while, particularly when my legs started to smell so bad, I thought that really there was a very low probability that I would make it. And so I thought maybe the best thing for everyone is if I just kind of roll off the ledge, and then they don't have the hassle of trying to get me down. Yeah, I thought about lots of things, but that survival instinct is pretty strong, and I guess it's what kept me alive. After about 50 hours, I kind of was getting more and more anxious. I just started shouting, you know, I don't know who to, you know, I just kind of felt I had to do something.
Hello! Hello!
And it was like, almost like a spiritual moment, because I shouted a few times, and then I heard the voice of Angus saying, "We're 2 pitches below." And this was like a really very emotional moment for me. I then, you know, I think if you have no hope, then it's really difficult, but this gave me hope. They started the process of getting me off the mountain. Angus would set up a belay, and he would then lower me and Luke on 2 ropes. It took them 2 days to lower me. Some of the people from the nearest village came up with some planks of wood, and they made like a wooden stretcher thing, and they carried the stretcher down with ropes and stuff down to base camp.
Someone who has been through that kind of torture. I mean, you can't compare that to any kind of success. You can write off any major summit ever made. It's just not comparable. I can't even begin to imagine the unbearable pain, the questions and mental pressure you have to endure. The only thing you can do, I guess, in that moment, to find the courage to get through that kind of situation is perhaps hope. And as long as there is hope, you have a chance.
Nice to meet you.
Amazing to meet you, finally.
Yes, finally, very
you know, when I got that email from you, I thought, well, you know, I mean, if I had my time again, I mean, would I want the same thing to happen? No, of course not. But, you know, I suppose there's something I've learned, something's come out of it. I've got the old one
This
here,
one, yeah.
which I don't think I'm going to use, actually.
You don't
I'm
trust
sure
him
it's
anymore.
fine. No, I'm sure it's fine. But this is very old-fashioned.
It is.
It's incredible that the crab still works, actually.
Yes, that's really,
amazing. I guess there are things that maybe I did in my 20s and early 30s that I would maybe not do now. But I still enjoy some level of risk. I think it keeps me alive. It keeps me awake. You know, if there was no risk in life, I think it would be really pretty boring.